We need to really quickly move on because we have a speaker coming to us in a different format via Skype. And her topic is something that might take you a bit by surprise at an AMT conference. But the fact is that this topic crosses lines into our industry. Erina. Erina is here with us. Erina is the Prevention and Awareness Coordinator at A21, a global non-profit organisation with a mission to end slavery through awareness, intervention and aftercare. Erina has worked with A21 for over 5 years and is motivated by a passion for people and the firm conviction that we can indeed abolish slavery in our lifetime. And we need to hear this because we care. Erina joins us via Skype from A21's Sydney office to tell us about modern slavery and its intersection with a range of industries in Australia and to give an insight into why massage therapists should be aware of the issues.
Hello, hi everyone. Great, well you can obviously see my face, but unfortunately I can't see you all. But a little fact about me, a little fun fact actually, I studied massage therapy in 2007. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it wasn't until I approached my lecturer with the fact that my phalanges started to hurt. I was like, what should I do? Should I pursue this? And he was like, you know what? Probably not. I'm like, okay, no worries. So that's a little fun fact about me. But anyways, it's such a privilege to be able to connect with you all in this way. First and foremost, I would like to thank Rebecca Bennett for reaching out to us and extending this invitation for us to be a part of your conference over the weekend. So just a little bit about A21. A21 is a global anti-slavery organisation. It was founded in 2008 by Nick and Christine Kane. And to date, we have 12 offices in 11 different countries. This includes 1 crisis care centre, 2 A21 restoration homes, and a child advocacy centre in Thailand. So human trafficking and or modern slavery, they're actually interchangeable. Human trafficking can simply be narrowed down to the exploitation of men, women and children for another person's benefit. It is when a person like you and myself are reduced to nothing but commodities, nothing but a bottle of water. But we know that as people, there is not a price tag on us. You know, we are invaluable. Every single person has inherent value just because they're human beings, just because we're human beings. And human trafficking, in fact, is a gross violation of human rights. There are 5 main forms of slavery. So that includes forced labour, which is forcing a person to work in captivity for little or no pay at all. There is sex trafficking, forcing, deceiving or coercing a person to perform a commercial sex act. Bonded labour, which is forcing a person to work for low wages to pay back an excessive amount of debt. Involuntary domestic servitude, which is forcing a person to work and live in the same place for little to no pay. And child soldiers, which is forcing a child to participate in an armed force. So it's very easy to think that slavery, number one, doesn't exist, that it was abolished back in 1948, but we have more slaves in the world today than any other time in history. And that's a really hard concept to fathom, a really hard truth to digest, because you would think that we would move beyond this point. You would think that we are, no longer barbaric and whatnot. But the truth is that there are more slaves in our world. There are slaves within Australia more than any other time in history. So according to the International Labour Organization Slavery Report of 2017, 62% of all modern slavery victims are located within the Asia-Pacific region. So more than half of the slaves that I've been talking about are located in the Asia-Pacific region. In regards to the forms of slavery within Asia Pacific, 73% of victims are exploited within a sexual exploitation means. That 73% of victims are coerced into a commercial sex act. 64% of all forced labor exploitation and 42% of forced marriage victims are within our region. So this is not something that only occurs within Greece. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Taken with Liam Neeson, and he goes in, he rescues his daughter that was forced and sold into sexual servitude, but this is actually happening in our own backyard. In 2016, the ILO identified an estimated 24.9 million persons as victims of forced labor. And the Global Slavery Index of 2016 states that there are over 40 million slaves in the world today. And the truth is, men and women there and here, numbers are desensitizing. Hey, numbers are dehumanizing. It is really easy to forget that each number, when we talk about 24.9 million victims are forced into forced labor, it's easy to think that they are just a commodity, that we're talking about a commodity, we're talking about a resource, but we actually cannot forget that each person, that each victim, that the millions of victims in the world today are actually human beings like you and myself. They're men, they're women, they're children, they have families, they belong to a family, they have dreams, hopes, and aspirations. And we cannot forget that as people who are free, people who can raise our voice on behalf of the voiceless. It is something that we must not forget. Australia has a population of just over 24 million people. And so in essence, the number of slaves that there are in the world today is almost the double of Australia's population. Now, I want us to actually think for a moment, what if you, what if your family, what if every Australian was forced into an act against our will, was at the mercy of another person? Australia is a destination country for slavery. So meaning that we receive trafficked victims, whereas other countries or other nations are known to be transient in nature, in which victims are sent through, and countries of origin, in which victims of slavery originate from and then are dispersed. It is easy to think, as I mentioned, that victims are only found in sex work or in massage parlors, but slaves can be found in an array of industries, such as the cleaning industry, such as the beauty industry, such in hospitality, factory work, domestic work, retail, construction, slave-like marriage, forced marriage, farming, and sex work. And so to highlight this, I'm actually going to read a few excerpts from a few news articles highlighting a few of those industries in which slaves have been found and identified in. So this is an article of about the coffee club. I'm not too sure if you guys have heard about that, but it's in regards to the coffee club exploitation of employee. And this article was released in the 19th of June, 2017, by the Sydney Morning Herald. All right, so reports have appeared that a Brisbane-based coffee club franchise has been fined $180,000 by the Federal Circuit for the inappropriate and grotesque exploitation of an employee. I wish this was an isolated example. It's not. It's another installment in sordid history of worker abuse across many businesses occurring all over this country. Our employment law system is broken. Wage theft is rampant, and workers are increasingly vulnerable to exploitation as the few options to recourse, such as our hard-fought for rights, including freedom of association and the right to strike, are whittled away. Unions whose history is steeped in the fight for better pay and conditions are increasingly subjected to disruptive campaigns. I'll keep going a little bit further. The Fair Work Commission's recent decision to slash penalty rates is a clear demonstration of how successful campaigns have been, from a person's day at work to their last. Australia's Fair Work legislation, and particularly the way in which it has been interpreted, leans too heavily in business's favour. Many of today's workplaces, because the law allows it, have shifted away from the system of enterprise agreements towards employers engaging agreement-free labour hire providers. Under these arrangements, a labour hire provider is under no obligation to provide work. There's no pay in between jobs, and workers can be forced to work for years without even being brought on formally as an employee. As the Coffee Club judgment showed, things aren't getting any better. And if you're one of Australia's 500,000 franchise industry workers, these examples show the extent of the problems in this industry. So we're talking about the hospitality industry here. And further expose the deficiencies in our workplace laws to protect these vulnerable workers. And that's something that I would like to highlight to us. The key word here is vulnerable. You know, a lot of the times when it comes to people being exploited, one of the main ways in which they are, or they are trapped into slavery or get recruited into slavery, is because they are vulnerable. They are looking for a better life for themselves. I'm going to read a short excerpt in regards to child brides. Okay, so that's forced marriage here in Australia. This was released in January 16, 2017. Parents trying to force daughters into horrific arranged marriages would have their passports torn up and be forced to reveal to authorities where their child could be found under tough New South Wales government laws. Just days after prominent Melbourne Imam Ibrahim Omaridik was charged with facilitating the forced marriage of a child under 16, New South Wales Family and Community Services is seeking urgent advice about how to better protect young people from arranged marriages. People forced into marriage become domestic slaves by day and sexual slaves by night. Facts Minister Brad Hazzard said last night. It's horrific. We need an entire suite of solutions which recognises that criminal sanctions are important but not the only answer. That's a small excerpt in regards to child brides, forced marriage in Australia. And this article is in relation to sex trafficking here. And this article was released in May 19, 2017. A teenage girl, so she was kept as a sexual slave in a Sydney house because she was able to escape and alert authorities, sparking an investigation into human trafficking and sexual servitude. The 17-year-old girl from Guinea in Western Africa sought help at the Asylum Seekers Centre on Bedford Street in Newtown late last month, saying she had escaped from a unit somewhere in Sydney's metropolitan area where she had been held captive, police said. Detectives Acting Superintendent Mick Hiddo, the State Crime Command's Crime Squad commander, appealed for that woman who was driving a small red car believed to be a hatchback to come forward to help with the investigation. This really is a case at the moment where there are a lot of questions and not enough answers for us. We are seeking help from this person known as Nicole, who in the early hours of the morning collected this young girl who had been trafficked, 17 years of age, and took her to the Asylum Seekers Centre. She is a really important witness, Nicole, and also potentially a really important source of information for us in terms of identifying the crime scene. He said the investigation had been extremely difficult. There are cultural issues, language issues. The statement has taken days and days to complete, so on and so forth. So why did I take a few moments to share with you all about the different forms of slavery? I share that because we cannot forget that slaves, men, women, and children, are actually forced into acts against their will. It's not they're wanting to perform a commercial sex act necessarily. They may not be They may be working at a massage parlor, but they may have gotten to that place out of false pretenses that they were going to be offered a waitressing job or an administrative job, but instead they come into our country and their documents are taken away, and then they are broken down, which is a term in which traffickers use to ensure that victims are obedient to their demands. These victims are broken down and are coerced into an industry or coerced into a job in which they never signed up for in the first place. So it's important that we realize that, you know, the person who may be involved in sex work may not be there by choice. It's important that we realize that the person who is, you know, working at a massage parlor and they provide additional services may not be there by choice. And so it's important that we realize that each person has a story and not necessarily jump into conclusions and assume that that this is a legitimate practice that is happening and or that person is there by choice is what I'm trying to say. So human trafficking and modern-day slavery is complex, but A21's solution is simple. So we combat this injustice through a 3R approach, which is reach the vulnerable and disrupt the demand, rescue the victim and seek justice against their captors, and restore survivors and equip them to live independently. So what does this look like? We prevent slavery from ever happening by engaging people through events, student presentations, and education programs. The average age of a trafficked victim is just 12 years old, and cases as young as 5 months have been identified in Thailand. I know that that is extremely hard to believe. We live in a world that is somewhat extremely broken, I think, to traffic anyone for that matter and to coerce any person against their will into an act that they were not ever designed to outwork is horrific. But I'm going to read you a short story of a victim in which we have rescued. This is from our 2016 Freedom Report. You can download it if you want for free on our website. But it was October last year when A21 in Thailand received an unforgettable phone call from the local hospital. An 18-month-old baby, a victim of human trafficking. She had been sexually abused, beaten, burned, and brought to the hospital in a coma. With multiple broken bones and burns on her face and body, this 18-month baby, had to undergo multiple surgeries to recover from the trauma. We assisted this little girl through our SAFE program and repatriated her. She was placed in a loving foster care family where A21 will continue to support her and provide medical care, counselling, and the education that she deserves. Without adequate legal and medical support from A21, she may not have been sent to the family. She may have been, sent back to the family who exploited her. So her family actually exploited this 18-month baby. These stories are heartbreaking, but they're the reason why we fight. So reach the vulnerable and disrupt the demand. You know, when it comes to slavery, it is based on a supply and demand model. So whether that is the demand is for cheap work, whether that is sex, whether that is, having, I guess, garments or, clothes being completed efficiently and effectively, whatever the industry, whatever it is, human trafficking is based on a supply and demand model. So in this case, the demand was for sex. So this family chose to sell the child for sex. Trafficking methods have evolved, and there is now a massive use of online avenues. So one of the most significant changes within Australia's trafficking landscape is the increase of online sex exploitation. And this particularly is prevalent amongst child victims. Alarms regarding cases of Australians commissioning recordings and the live stream of the sexual abuse and torture of children in the Philippines and Cambodia were raised in the conviction of Melbourne man Peter Scully in late 2016 to early 2017. Leslie Gale noted that the AFP had received over 4,500 reports of child exploitation, including the production of online abuse between January and May 2017. Now, I know that this is very heavy. It's very different to, I'm sure, what you have come to the conference for. But as it was mentioned earlier, it is something that we must actually have a conversation about. It's something that we must have awareness about, because if we are unaware that, number one, this happens, but number two, which is I'm going to actually provide you all with signs to look out for when it comes to a potential trafficking situation. But if this is something that we are unaware about, then we are in no position to actually put an end to this. Public awareness. So another way in which we reach the vulnerable and disrupt the demand is through public awareness. So this means that we engage mass media and community action to highlight human trafficking. This action of our prevention work enables us to be able to reach people via various sporting events, such as we had an agreement with British Airways in the lead up of the Soccer World Cup in 2014, that they would show a human trafficking awareness video on every flight. So far, we've been able to train over 14,000 professionals around this global injustice, and we have been able to reach over 574,000 through prevention and awareness programs. Secondly, we seek to reach the victim and seek justice. Now, traffickers do use a myriad of ways in which they seek to hold their victim in captivity. The most prevalent way in which a victim falls for or becomes a victim, is through being offered a false job. So that from the people in whom we've rescued so far, the survivors, they have testified that 42.5% of victims have fallen for a false job advertisement. But to date, we've been able to rescue 773 men, women, and children out of slavery. And the whole why behind A21 is we fight for the one person. We believe that every single person in whom we're able to reach, rescue, and restore is worth our sacrifice. It is worth the sacrifice of, whether that's our time, our energy, or our resources. Every single person deserves to live in freedom. And in regards to restore, we seek to restore the survivor and equip them to live independently. Our desire is to empower the survivor to move from a place of crisis to a place of stabilization. So as we only have a few moments left, but I would love to leave you with action steps in moving forward. If you're going to take anything away from today's talk, please remember that, we can't do everything, but we must do something. So what is that one thing that you can do in order to help and be a voice on behalf of the voiceless? Okay, so signs that might identify a possible victim of slavery include they are transported to or from work or lives and works at the same place. They may have signs of abuse, and a person may show signs of being denied food, water, sleep, and or medical care. They may have bruises, scars, and other signs of physical abuse and torture. Victims of human trafficking are often beaten in areas that will not damage their appearance, such as their lower back. They may be distrustful and suspicious. The victim of trafficking may act as they distrust any person who offers them assistance or attempts to converse with them. They may demonstrate affection towards the abuser and or may have a branding, so that is often a tattoo, signaling that they belong or they're property of someone else. So those are a few signs in which you can look out for. You know, traffickers do use social media as a platform to lure victims. And so an action step for each one of you is, if you're on social media, use your social media as a platform to raise awareness and to mobilize people in your community to take action. So at A21, we have really practical ways in which you and people all across the world can take action, and that is through A teams. So if you just head on to a21.org, take action, and there'll be a Dropbox of various ways in which you can get involved. Also, to end, there is what we call what we have a Walk for Freedom, which is our global annual event. There was 16 walks across Australia alone and over 600 walks across 50 different countries. And this took place on 14th of October, so just last weekend. There was a walk that was hosted in Canberra. And so if you want to be a part of that, abolish slavery with each step, hashtag. But yeah, totally went there. But hey, if you would like to be a part of Walk for Freedom, you know, we seek to abolish slavery with each step. Save the date in your phone. Don't know if you can do this right now, but October 20th is next year's Walk for Freedom. We're going to have more walks within Australia than ever before. And we genuinely believe that we will abolish slavery in our lifetime, but we can't do it on our own. So you're welcome to join us in the freedom journey, and thank you for listening so intently.
A huge thank you to Erina. Thank you so much. Don't know where to look. Thank you so much. I'm just going to get Beck to come up. I think, Beck, you actually went in the Walk for Freedom, is that right? Yeah. Very exciting. Heavy, hey. Not like patient engagement and statistics that make us feel good about ourselves, but a great chance to feel empowered to know the truth about what's going on. And I think I can say on behalf of a few of us at least, I know I've felt threatened when certain establishments have opened up in my area, and I've thought, what is going on there? So really good to know that there's actually people, you know, fighting the good fight, and that we can participate in that too. Do you want to say anything? Yeah, go for it.
As Michelle mentioned, when I was arranging for Erina to speak today, I ended up deciding to join the Walk for Freedom. And so that was last Saturday in Sydney. And one of the things that the organisers did was actually get people to listen to a podcast while we were going around. So we listened to 3 case studies in that podcast, and it was a bit of a stretch for me because I was walking through the streets of Sydney with tears pouring down my face, and the stories were a lot more detailed than the one that Erina went into today, and universally horrific and unfathomable and unimaginable to everybody in the room. And I know that there's probably a lot of people sitting here saying, why did we do this today? Why did we get a speaker to talk about modern slavery and abolishing slavery worldwide? What relevance does that have to massage therapists? And I think, as Michelle has kind of started to explore in her comment just then, that we've also traditionally had this incredibly uneasy relationship with the sex industry, and we get quite tied up in knots with the use of the term massage being associated with the sex industry. And what we wanted to leave you with, as controversial as this might sound on face value, we wanted to leave you with an idea that sometimes the stories are much more grey and complicated than the black and white moral outrage that we tend to greet them with. And to think that maybe, first of all, the sex industry is not our competition. Thank you. And that basically we have a lot in common with the regulated brothel industry. And perhaps that's an uncomfortable thing to hear as well, but the regulated brothel industry has just as much investment in tidying up these problems, in tidying up these issues, and in stopping these practices as we do. And it's relevant to us because it's also a public health crisis. And one of the things that started to happen is that practices that are by law not allowed in regulated establishments are leaking out in these areas, and it's a public health crisis. I don't know whether I'm allowed to be this blunt, but looking at Michelle for guidance. But if things are being done without the infection control requirements that the regulated brothel industry are bound by, then you can imagine the ramifications of that. And we, as massage therapists, have to be concerned about the broad public health implications of anything, really. So I guess, really, we just wanted you to stop and consider that before you get outraged when you think about the place down the street that you know is doing extras, that there might be people working in there and they might be forced labouring and they might not want to be there, and anything that we can do to be a kind of less moralising and more positive force for change is, I think, only going to be for the better all round. Thanks.